The man fishing in the open sea was shocked to discover that he had caught the legendary mermaid. Seeing the young and beautiful mermaid, the man had wicked thoughts. However, just as he approached, the unconscious mermaid suddenly woke up. Immediately, the man was found dead, and his companion hurriedly pulled out a weapon, but to his surprise, the mermaid could even hypnotize. This is the latest 2024 American horror film, The Little Mermaid. Archaeologists discovered an ancient temple and accidentally released a prehistoric mermaid, nearly causing the destruction of the earth. The story begins with an archaeological discovery. On an unknown island in the Caribbean, archaeologist Eric led a team to excavate an ancient ruin. Through inscriptions and stylistic analysis of the ruins, Eric speculated that the site might date back to the 17th century age of exploration. However, while the team was carefully digging, a man suddenly approached Eric. It turned out that the land was privately owned by the man. If the archaeological team wanted to continue excavating, they had to pay a large sum of money. Hearing the demand for more money, Eric felt helpless. Before the excavation, Eric had already paid a sum, but the greedy man thought it was too little and wanted to raise the price at the last minute. To continue the excavation, Eric had no choice but to contact his friend Ferdinand. When Ferdinand learned that Eric had discovered a ruin on a Caribbean island, he became instantly interested. Ferdinand agreed to lend the money, but he also wanted to join the excavation. Having no other choice, Eric agreed to his request. Just after hanging up the phone, Eric's assistant, Archie, came over and said that a local pawnshop owner wanted him to appraise some items. Eric arrived at the living room. The pawnshop owner took out some gold coins from a package. Upon careful inspection, Eric discovered that these coins were from 17th century Spain, a rare find. Examining the engravings and designs, Eric confirmed that the coins were genuine. He was extremely curious about the seller's identity. These coins were ancient treasures, each worth thousands. So why would someone pawn them? The pawnshop owner didn't know the seller's identity either. He only knew that the person was a woman and very generous. Eric wanted to meet the seller, and the owner agreed, saying he would ask during their next transaction. Just then, Archie ran over to notify Eric that they had uncovered something new. Eric immediately rushed to the site. This time they had excavated a skeleton. The skeleton wore a crown on its head and had some necklaces on its chest. In its right hand, they found a well-preserved statue. Eric speculated that the remains might belong to a priest. He instructed Archie to bring tools to collect the skeleton. Just after finishing the collection, Eric received a call from the pawnshop owner. The seller had agreed to meet him, which surprised Eric. He quickly washed up, changed clothes, and headed to town. However, to his surprise, the seller was a beautiful woman. The woman introduced herself as Aurora, the daughter of a wealthy man. Her father was passionate about collecting, so their family owned several antiques. Hearing that Aurora's father was a collector, Eric didn't think much of it. They chatted for a while and found themselves interested in each other. Since he had yet to pay the additional excavation fee, the dig was temporarily halted. Bored, Eric took his team diving along the coast. While diving, Eric suddenly saw a strange fish. When he turned to take a closer look, he was shocked to find that it was a mermaid. Before he could examine further, the mermaid vanished. He returned to the shore and told his companions that he had seen a mermaid, but no one believed him. They thought Eric was making it up. Frustrated, Eric turned on his camera to prove his words, but the mermaid was too fast. The camera only captured a blurry image. For some reason, looking at the figure in the photo, Eric felt a strange sense of familiarity. Just then, Eric received a call from the landlord. Since Eric had not paid the fee, the landlord wanted to reclaim the land. Eric asked the landlord to give him more time. His friend was already on the way, and the payment would be made the next day. However, the greedy landlord still refused and came up with various excuses to extort more money. Hearing the landlord's demands, Eric could no longer tolerate it. He immediately argued with the landlord, nearly getting into a fight. Since he couldn't come up with the remaining money, the excavation had to be halted. Feeling frustrated, Eric found Aurora and told her about the greedy landlord. Learning that there was a ruin on the island, Aurora seemed very interested. She told Eric not to worry. She could solve the problem. Hearing that Aurora wanted to buy the land, Eric was surprised. His feelings for Aurora grew even stronger, and they spent a romantic night together. However, while Eric was fast asleep, he didn't notice that Aurora had gone to find the landlord. Seeing that Aurora was beautiful, the landlord tried to take advantage of her, but unexpectedly, Aurora suddenly emitted a strange sound wave. The next morning, Eric was woken up by a call from Ferdinand. He rushed back to the excavation site. Excitedly, he took out the stone tablet they had unearthed the previous day and wanted Ferdinand to examine it. However, upon seeing the inscriptions on the stone tablet, Ferdinand froze. It turned out that Ferdinand was a scholar of ancient languages and could read many old scripts. He told Eric that the text on the stone tablet was a curse. It warned future generations that this place was a seal, imprisoning a terrible entity. While they were chatting, Aurora arrived as well. She told Eric not to worry about the landlord anymore. Just earlier, Aurora had already purchased all the land so the archaeological team could excavate as much as they wanted. Without the landlord's interference, Eric decided to expand the excavation area. After several days of hard work, they finally uncovered the entrance to the ruin. However, just as Eric was about to open it, the previously clear sky suddenly roared with thunder. Seeing the dark clouds gathering, Eric had no choice but to stop for the day. To celebrate finding the entrance, Eric took his team to a bar at the foot of the mountain to relax. While everyone was enjoying themselves, Ferdinand pulled Eric aside. He told him that he had deciphered the inscription on the stone tablet the night before. The inscription warned them that the ruin was extremely dangerous and must never be opened. But Eric didn't believe in supernatural tales. They had already excavated the ruin. If they didn't open it, wouldn't all their efforts be wasted? Eric told Ferdinand to stop overthinking. There was no such thing as an evil spirit in this world. After the celebration, Ferdinand returned to his residence. He went through a large number of ancient texts and discovered some legends about the island. It turned out that in ancient times, this island was called Mermaid Island. It was said that many mermaids lived here, and they had lifespans of over 100 years. The leader of the mermaids, however, was a terrifying demon. The demon needed to consume large amounts of human blood daily. To ensure a steady supply, the demon commanded the mermaids to lure humans. They would seduce people to the island and then hunt them down. Until the 17th century, when a Spanish military force passed by. A priest among them set a trap on the island and sealed the demon inside an ancient temple. Reading this historical account, Ferdinand became even more convinced of his suspicions. He speculated that the ruin Eric had discovered was most likely the very temple mentioned in the ancient records. He immediately left his apartment to find Eric and stop the excavation. However, just as he reached the hallway downstairs, Ferdinand unintentionally spotted a photograph from 1921 on the roadside wall. In the photo was a young and beautiful woman. She looked exactly like Aurora. Ferdinand instantly recalled what he had read in the ancient texts the previous night. Only mermaids could live for hundreds of years. Could Aurora be a mermaid? While Ferdinand was deep in thought, a man in a black robe suddenly blocked his path.
He works for me.
Is that right? You gave me quite the start.
Apologies. It's just, we saw you wandering around and...
Seeing Aurora standing nearby, Ferdinand became even more convinced of his theory. He quickly came up with an excuse to leave, but Aurora warned Ferdinand not to interfere with the excavation, or he would never be able to leave the island. However, Ferdinand didn't care about her threats. He immediately found Eric and told him about Aurora and the legend of the mermaids, but Eric refused to believe in any demon stories. The two had a fierce argument and ultimately parted ways. Archie tried to mediate. He found Ferdinand and attempted to calm him down. But when Ferdinand took Archie to the hallway and showed him Aurora in the 100-year-old photograph, Archie was completely stunned. Could the legend of the mermaids be true? While the two were discussing what to do, a toad-like creature suddenly appeared before them. Meanwhile, Eric had already opened the entrance to the ruin. However, due to its low-lying terrain, the ruins were submerged underwater. Eric prepared diving equipment and decided to explore first. If the temple was intact, they would pump out the water later. With the help of his companions, Eric dived into the ruins. To his surprise, the site was remarkably well preserved. The statues and inscriptions remained clear and untouched. Excited, Eric explored the area. He found that the ruins were much larger than he had expected. But just as he was about to venture deeper, he was suddenly pulled back by the safety rope. From his companions, he learned that he had been underwater for several hours, yet he clearly remembered only being down there for a few minutes. Although puzzled, Eric did not dwell on it. He returned to the mountain base, intending to consult Ferdinand about the inscriptions. But when he arrived at the apartment, Aurora was already waiting for him. Aurora led Eric to the shore. As they approached, Eric saw Ferdinand and Archie tied up. It turned out that the ancient records were true. Aurora was indeed the legendary mermaid, and the ruins Eric had discovered were the temple sealing away the demon. Long ago, the priest had created a barrier around the temple, preventing the mermaids from approaching, so they spread rumors to lure archaeologists to the site, hoping that humans would break the seal for them. Aurora asked Eric to help them lift the seal and release their leader. In return, she promised not to harm Ferdinand and the others, and even offered Eric a fortune. With that wealth, Eric could live the rest of his life in luxury. However, while Aurora and Eric were negotiating, Ferdinand secretly loosened his bindings. He picked up a harpoon from the ground and struck down the toad monster in a single blow. Then, he prepared to kill Aurora as well, but just as they were about to strike, Eric stopped them. Despite his severe injuries, he urged Aurora to leave. Seeing the wounded Eric, Aurora had no choice but to retreat into the sea unwillingly. After Eric's death, Ferdinand and Archie rushed back to the ruins. They brought large boulders to seal off the temple, but the seal had already been partially undone. The stones were no longer enough to suppress its power completely. Ferdinand recalled the inscriptions on the stone tablet. Following them, he chanted the incantation. As the ritual concluded, the seal was successfully reinforced. The demon's power was once again confined within the temple. However, Ferdinand and the others were unaware that deep in the forest behind the island, 3 adventurers had just discovered another ruin. Clearly, the mermaid's story was far from over, yet the film abruptly ended there. This is the full plot of the 2025 horror movie, The Little Mermaid. Overall, the film was rather mediocre, especially the ending. There wasn't even a proper final battle. Alright, that's all for today's sharing, and see you next time.